So let's get through this as quick as we can because we'll finish this at the Sunnyvale Fire Department. When we start looking at this, everybody in EMS starts preparing for the call well before the call. These pictures here just give you the certain different types of ambulances that are out there. I believe that they're going to have a top 1. I didn't stare long enough at their ambulance, but I think it's a top 1. I personally like the top 3s. That's what I work out of, is a top 3. The top 1 is essentially a pickup with a box on the back of them. To me, they're very rough. And you'll see this when you do your EMS ride-outs, how rough it is in the back of the ambulance. A little movement up front with the steering wheel causes a lot of movement in the back. Maybe these guys would be good enough to drive us around the block or something and let you see the different movement in the back of the ambulance. But always try to hang on to a 3-point contact in the back. When I stand up at the back of the ambulance, if all possible, I grab the bar on top, or I make sure I have a 3-point contact. So these are a little rough. The top 1s are a little rough for me. The top 3s are a little smoother. They have a little bit better, smoother suspension to them. I like the looks of them better, but that's just me. Then you get sort of a van type, a top 2 ambulance. These are primarily used in just where you have a transport service, a transfer service, where they're taking patients from one hospital to another, a nursing home to the hospital, something of that nature. These 3 here are used primarily in a 911 area. And then you get this huge ambulance. You'll see Irving has them. Quite a few of the fire departments have them. Just these big, huge ambulances. I don't like them at all. They're just too big for an ambulance. For me, for my taste. But several different types of ambulances out there. The top 3s have a walkthrough where you can walk. If you're little, you can fit through from the cabin into the back and forth, which makes it good on rainy days if you don't need to get out. Or if you're running from the patient, you can jump up front or something. This just has a hole in the window, so you can't necessarily go from the box to the cab. And the van is sometimes has a little door there. The problem with the van is they're so small. They're very small in comparison. Maybe someday if the van pulls up, a top 2 pulls up at the hospital, you're in the ER, you can go out and maybe ask them to look at the top 2 and the top 4 if there's any around here. But it's good to see the different types of ambulances, and that's something that you'll be able to do at the hospital as well. All right, so every ambulance in the state of Texas has a minimum supply list. You can go on every ambulance, no matter what service that is there. You can go to Mesquite or Dallas or Austin, and they all have a minimum equipment list that they have to have all that equipment on. Now they have extra, but all of them have the same equipment list. So if you start working or when you do your ride-outs, you're seeing they're going to check their morning check-off. They'll go in there and they'll have a check-off sheet and they'll check and make sure, okay, I have 10 18-gauge catheters, 10 20-gauge catheters. I have 6 6-inch, 6 3-inch clean, right? So they're going through their equipment list to make sure that they have all the equipment. Because the same thing is they can inspect the classroom. This guy could be at Parkland, and you pull up, you take your patient in, and when you come back out, he can say, "Hey, I'm here to," it's called ramp. I'm here to ramp you, meaning that on the ambulance ramp, he's going to inspect your ambulance, and you better have all that equipment that's on your equipment list, or run sheets saying that you've used it, depending on how strict they are. But the major things you need to have. If you don't have them, that inspector could shut you down right there. He could take you completely out of service. Like if he inspected you and you didn't have any oxygen on your ambulance, he'd take you out of service. He or she take you out of service. Okay? I mean, it didn't have to be a pretty big thing. Small things you can get rode up over. Big things that take you out of service. Other ways, and also find the provider that you're working for. So make sure that you inspect everything that you have. I don't know if you can see the little picture, but this guy's inspecting his cardiac monitor. You can ask Dallas Fire Department what happens when you don't check out your cardiac monitor. Because they get sued. When you go on CPR and your monitor doesn't work. What happened there was 7 o'clock. I mean, it was the morning. It was mid-morning. Called out on CPR. Got to the house. Patient was in cardiac arrest. They hooked the monitor up. Went to turn it on, and guess what? What do you think happened? It didn't come on. The monitor didn't work. Now it's a piece of equipment, right? So the monitor could just break like any other piece of equipment. But all these electronic devices that we have, it shows the last time it was turned on. And it wasn't turned on at 7 o'clock at shift change. So they proved that, hey, they didn't check their monitor out in the morning. And they got sued and lost because they didn't check their monitor out. If you need a piece of equipment and you don't have it, you're held responsible for that. There's quite a bit of responsibility that goes into even this part. So make sure that you have all your supplies. Make sure that you check out everything that you're responsible for. You don't want to go through all this pain and agony of getting your certification and then losing it over a piece of equipment. The guy I used to relieve on the ambulance, really good friend. Best guy you ever know. Do anything for you. Right? And like most EMS guys, they come in and say, oh, we replaced everything we used, you don't need anything. Right? And I believe this guy when he tells me that. Okay, thanks. But what do I do? Check it anyway. I mean, he could be standing right there, but I'm still counting everything and checking everything. And that's okay. They know that because I'm held responsible for it. So happens is that night they ran a CPR. First thing in the morning, we're checking through the ambulance, and he goes, oh yeah, I replaced everything. I get to looking, and there's not a bag valve mask. I don't have a BVM. They forgot to put the BVM in. So they made just a simple mistake, right? But if I would have taken that guy's word for it, I'd went all through the day without a bag valve mask on the ambulance. So those are just simple things that you've really got to check your equipment. Check what you're responsible for. When you guys move up into other medicine, nursing, and things like that, make sure that you are checking what you're responsible for. It's too easy of a thing to do and lose your license or your certification over that you for not doing it. It's just sort of laziness. You want to make sure before every shift, the usual thing is the paramedic will check out the back and the EMT will check out the front. That means that they will check the oil, check all the lights, check the box, make sure there's not any damage from the day before. All this is they document all this stuff down here, okay? And they continue to write it down. Check the oil, okay? I know of a guy just recently got fired because he didn't check the oil in his truck. Guess what happened to his ambulance? It blew up. The engine blew up because there wasn't any oil in it. So he was the last one that should have checked oil in there. Didn't check it. The engine seized. Thousands of dollars. And they fired him because he didn't do his job. Simple thing, checking the oil. So you want to make sure that your ambulance is ready. If you're on a call, okay, if you're going to a 911 call and your ambulance breaks down, let's say use this scenario, I don't know if he was on a call or not, but going to a 911 call, okay, your ambulance engine seizes up, no oil in it, boom, call out, we're out of service, car broke down, right? Ambulance broke down, had to send another ambulance. If that person suffers any kind of extra, let's say the person was having a heart attack and he went in cardiac arrest due to the delay that took place between the time that you broke down and the time getting another ambulance out there, and you can be held liable for that if it's your fault, like you didn't check the oil. Now, if a belt breaks, something like that, you can't be held responsible for that, correct? It's a piece of machinery. But if it's something that due to your lack of doing your job, you can be held liable for that in court. I believe you can. I believe they could sue you if they found out they knew the system, right? And that's what they hire a lawyer for, by the way, is to dig around and see if there was anything wrong. So make sure that your ambulance is ready for service. Do all the inspections on it. Make sure all your supplies are up to date. When you guys start doing your ride-outs, make sure that you go with them and see where all the supplies are kept. The way if they have to send you back to an ambulance for the backboard, that you know where it's at, right? Sort of simple things. So you start receiving the call. All right, the EMD, the emergency medical dispatcher, which that's something that you guys could get into as well. After you got out, you got your EMT. It's a small 3 or 4 day school. You could go be an EMS dispatcher, get your EMD. They take the call. They start giving you pre-arrival instructions. Very important. The time that the tones go off and I hear the call is the time that I start planning my call. I start taking all the pre-arrival dispatch instructions. All right. I start thinking worst to least. So if the patient's having chest pain, I start thinking about what am I going to do mentally. You know, if this patient's in cardiac arrest, I start preparing for that. We have to find the place, right? If it's a wreck, start coordinating, make sure the fire department or rescue's en route. Make sure, if it's an assault or something like that, that the police department's en route. So there's a lot of things that go on as soon as the call comes in that you need to start working on, because it's a very busy time and you haven't done any patient care yet. But it's primary that you start thinking about this. Okay? I worked with the guy the other night that was new. He didn't really know his way around, and it took me out of this pre-call phase, because I'm used to working with people that when I get in, they drive, so when I get in, I'm thinking about the call. Well, working with this particular guy, I had to work on more directions. I had to get us to the call, which is not necessarily my function. So it took me out of this pre-call phase. It was sort of something I had to work at, because I showed up at the call and I hadn't been thinking about the call because I'm thinking about how to get to the call. So even things like that you have to start working on in this pre-call phase. Very important. So make sure that this is sort of flashback. You want to make sure that the sirens work, everything works in the ambulance. Test all the sirens early in the morning, and that way, even if they may go out, but at least you tested it and signed off that they worked in that morning. That slides out of place. When you get to the scene, make sure here that you're parking correctly. You got this little picture of the ambulance. So here's the police. They got this sort of marked off. Back up in here, typically, where you see the little exits where the police have it marked off, there should be a fire engine parked across the road. I bet you guys have seen that before, right? You go out to you're driving somewhere and you come across a wreck, and a fire engine's blocking the majority of the road. And that's good. That keeps us safe to do our business and without someone trying to hit us. So you come around the wreck. The reason they come around the accident between these two cars is so they don't get blocked in. So responsibility is driving the ambulance. You want to make sure when you pull up on the scene that you don't get blocked in, because then you're stuck. We're going to talk about helicopter landing in a little bit. You want to make sure that if you're the second ambulance on that scene, that you don't get blocked in by the helicopter, because you can't move. Now you have a patient in that you're trying to transport and you can't move. So that's another sort of non-patient responsibility that you're going to have, is just parking the ambulance. Make sure that it's parked right. You might, if you don't have a police car or a fire engine there, you may need to park the ambulance where you can operate. So you're placing the ambulance between you and the patient, so you can safely function. We don't set out the cones like that little picture where you have the flashing lights. But remember, the drunks drive right towards the flashing lights at night. They'll be sitting there and go, oh, lights. And they'll go right towards them. So, same way, make sure that the police usually, if they're going to put out flares or cones, the police will do that, or the fire department will do it on the EMS side. Make sure that you have the appropriate gloves and mask or shields on, or whatever you need as far as when you get out. Now, there's I don't remember what the state law is, but the state law is that if you're on the highway, even as an EMS worker, you have to be on a reflective vest. So now, y'all notice that now that all the fire and EMS guys, they're out there, even some of the police, I believe, when they're out on the road, they're wearing a reflective vest. To me, I don't think that helps that much. It just gives us another target for someone to see at the middle of the night and start heading towards. But that's one thing that has changed. They require you do that reflective vest. So now we've got to the patient. We're doing some patient care. Now we need to transfer the patient back to the ambulance. So we're going to make sure that they're strapped. Part of your documentation, or the place that I work at, requires that I document in my narrative patient strapped to cot, or patient transferred to cot, how they were transferred, either assisted or we full lift, we lift them up off the ground, and then secured with straps ×3. That's essentially the first line of my report. ABCs, move patient to cot, full lift, secured patient to cot, straps ×3. That way it's saying that you've put the patient, you've lifted the patient completely on the cot, and you've secured them with straps. And that's sort of a thing that you do documentation-wise, but ambulance-wise, you make sure that they're strapped on, that they're on the cot correctly, and then that they're covered up. And it may be that you need to get a different, like a chair to carry them out with, all right? A backboard, something that's going to help you transfer the patient onto the ambulance. You want to make sure that they're packaged up. Packaged means, either place them on the cot or the backboard where they're not in a whole lot of discomfort. You don't want to make your patient uncomfortable if all possible. Stabilize before you start moving them. Very important. Sort of stabilize all especially the impaled objects. But if you have bandages or splints, make sure that when you move the patient, that those things are not going to fall off or get hung up. The straps on the backboards and on the cot, make sure the straps are tucked in. Right? The strap, one of the straps hanging off the cot, and you hit the strap with the wheel, it'll stop the cot almost instantly if the wheel rolls up on the strap. And it could tilt the patient over. It could cause the cot to fall over if you're not careful. We'll go through what I call cotology at the fire department. We'll learn the correct way to work these cots and to move the cots. The last thing you would ever want to do in your career is drop a patient. It's just almost a time to get another job. If you drop a patient, almost all the time they're going to terminate you. You won't lose your certification, but you'll have to get another job. Cover them up. It's always good to keep the patient warm. Right? Your responsibility to make sure that you have blankets, things to keep the patient warm. When you do that, when you move them to the ambulance. Like we said, we already talked about the 3 straps. Most of the ambulances now have shoulder harnesses. Personally, I don't use them. They're sort of a pain, but I just prefer the 3 straps. But the shoulder harnesses will keep you safe. If you were to have an accident in the ambulance, you're in the back with the patient. Usually the patient on the cot is going to have the worst injuries. They're strapped down, but you want to make sure that they're securely strapped and protect the patient.
I won't be here Friday either because it's soccer game.
Okay. So protecting yourself, you're at a great risk. Make sure all the equipment is secured in the back of the ambulance. So you get the patient in the back of the ambulance. Now you're ready to sort of transport. Make sure that you try to remain seated. This doesn't work all the time. I've never really been able to wear a seatbelt. You're up and moving around too much. The patient's moving. But if all possible, try to put on your seatbelt. Because if you're unsecured, if you don't have your seatbelt on in the back of the ambulance, and they get hit and they start rolling over, you're going to be like a ping pong ball back there. Usually, it's a fatality that takes place. The ambulance gets hit, some reason on the side, overturns the ambulance. The person in the back of the ambulance usually doesn't survive. It's just, there's too many things to hit. The monitor weighs about 25 pounds or so. So we always have our monitor hooked in with a seat belt. It's secured, so if we turn over, the things are not going to start flying around. Big, heavy things are not flying around. All the oxygen cylinders are secured. All right, so if something happens, they don't start flying around. But as you will see, and some of you've already done yours, so you know how bumpy it is back there. So you'll see once you get in the bag, you can get tossed over pretty easy. Usually if I'm driving, I try to get the EMT student up, and I'll be watching them in the back of the rear view, and I'll say, hey, can you go get me that box of gloves in the back of the ambulance? And then they'll hop up and they'll start walking back, and I'll notice that they don't have a 3-point contact, and I'll hit the brakes, and they'll just like they'll start walking one direction and then fall back the other.
It's like trying to walk on a bus.
Yeah, exactly. But it's pretty funny to me. But be secure, 3-point contact in the back. So now you're transporting the patient. During transport, you still have a job. You have to continue the assessment, make sure that there's secure. The straps might be too tight, too loose. Make sure they continue to adjust the straps, position the patient so they're comfortable as possible and secure.
What's the 3-point contact?
It's a good question. I guess I should explain that. You have 2 contact with your feet, right? It's 3-point contact to the ground. So you have 2 contact with your feet, and then my hand's the 3rd. So when you see the ambulance on Friday, there'd be a bar up top, and so 1, 2, and then 3. So I'll grab the bar on top when I'm standing up, or I'll lean up my hand up against a cabinet or something, make sure I have 3-point contact. It just sort of helps balance you a little bit. 2-point contact in the back of the ambulances. It just says it's like walking on a bus. So you know how it is walking on the bus when it's moving. You're always trying to look for something to grab. So secure the patient. Make sure that you continue to reassess the patient, looking for respiratory cardiac compromise. Loosen the clothing. You always have their personal effects that you have to take with you. So make sure that you take them and give them back to the patient. And then communicate to the patient. Just don't shove them in the back of the ambulance and stop talking to them. Especially if you sit in the chair behind them because they can't see you. All right?